Hello girls, I hope you're staying safe at home. To continue with the circulatory system, today we are going to talk about the circulation of blood in the heart. Now, the circulation of blood in the heart starts with the contraction of the two auricles. So here you have the two auricles. So it starts contracting, okay? And the ventricles at this time are relaxing. So you can see how these two will be pushed in, the auricles, and the ventricles are relaxing, so it is larger. And at this time the ventricles are empty, that means there is no blood. So the blood from the atria or the auricles, it will come into the ventricles. So here you can see these two arrows shows you here. Now next, this step is known as atrial systole, that is the atria is contracting, and ventricular diastole, that means the ventricles are relaxing or dilating, it has become bigger. Now after that, what happens? The ventricles contract. So here in this B you can see it squeezes in, okay, and the atria relaxes, so it relaxes, becomes larger, the auricles. So the blood from the ventricles under pressure, it wants to go back into the auricles, but again, here there are the valves, the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve, which gets tightened and it closes the passage and does not allow the backflow of blood into the auricles. Okay, so what happens is the chordae tendineae holds the flaps of the valves and does not allow the blood to go back into the auricles. So the only course left for the ventricular blood is to enter the pulmonary artery. Okay, it enters the pulmonary artery from the right ventricle and aorta from the left ventricle. And the mouths of the pocket-like valves, that is the semilunar valves, at the base of these two blood vessels, they face away from the ventricles. So the blood leaving the ventricle presses the valves flat and then it goes through the two blood vessels. Now when the ventricles dilate again, okay, when it becomes relaxes, what happens? The blood from the pulmonary artery and the aorta, it tends to return back into the ventricles. But what happens at that time? The flaps, that is the valves here, it closes of the semilunar valve and does not allow the backflow of blood. So this is known as ventricular systole or atrial diastole. Please keep these two diagrams in mind, children, because in your diagram questions these diagrams will come and you are supposed to recognize which phase is it. Okay, the first one shows atrial systole or ventricular diastole, and the second one shows ventricular systole or atrial diastole. So next we move on to the steps of a heartbeat or the cardiac cycle. Each heartbeat consists of two main steps. The atria first contracts, as I already explained, followed by the contraction of the ventricles. So the contraction phase is known as systole and is followed by an expansion phase which is known as diastole. Each full beat of a human heart lasts for about 0.85 seconds. That is the contraction of the auricles, that is systole, about 0.15 seconds. Contraction of the ventricles, that is systole of ventricles, 0.30 seconds. And both the chambers, that is the auricles and the ventricles, in a relaxed state, 0.40 seconds. So that makes a total of 0.85 seconds. Now at the end of the ventricular systole, means when it is contracted, the ventricles, they start relaxing. That is ventricular diastole. So in the meantime, the auricles have also been relaxing, that is atrial diastole, and for a fraction of a second, for a short period, both the atria and the ventricles are in a relaxed state. So that is known as joint diastole. That means when both the atria and the ventricles are in a relaxed state. So that is joint diastole. So the whole sequence of events in the heartbeat is called the cardiac cycle. Now the heart sounds, the lup and dup. If you hear your heart sound by placing a stethoscope on your chest, you will hear two sounds. One is lub and other one is dup. Okay, in short succession, there is a gap in between. Dup, up, up like that. Okay, so the first sound lub is produced when the atrioventricular, that is the tricuspid and bicuspid valves, get closed sharply at the start of the ventricular systole, so that it does not allow the backflow of blood. And the second sound dup is produced when at the beginning of ventricular diastole, the semilunar valves at the roots of the aorta and pulmonary artery get closed. So actually you are hearing the sound of the valves closing. So the rate of heartbeat is different for different species, and even in individuals of the same species it cannot be the same. Some of the variations in beats per minute at rest is different in different species. Okay, you don't have to go into detail, this is just for your information. Whale 15 beats per minute, okay, elephant 25, horse 40, adult men 64, between 64 to 72, and women 72 to 80, cat 120, newborn baby, okay, 140, heartbeat is very fast, rat 250, and sparrow in vigorous activity when it is flying, it's about 800 to 900 beats per minute. Okay, now do you find any relationship between the size of the body and the rate of the heartbeat? Answer is yes. Smaller the size, faster is the heart rate. So here only you saw a newborn infant 140 beats per minute. That means the size is smaller. Okay, in an adult between 72 to 64 to 72, or in women it is 72 to 80. Okay, so smaller, the faster is the heart rate, because smaller the animal, what happens? The more it loses its body heat due to higher surface volume ratio. So the increased heart rate distributes body heat faster. That is the only reason. Next is at the growing stage, such as the human baby, they have higher metabolism for body, for growth. So the faster heart rate keeps the supply and takeoff of the metabolic substances in right quantity. That means more oxygen will be given to each and every cell, which is continuously dividing for the growth of the baby. Okay, next we move on to the pacemaker. Now the impulse or command which starts the heartbeat, that means a command must be given for the heart to beat. It arises in the pacemaker, which is also known as sinoatrial node, or SAN. And where do you find it? You find it in the walls of the right auricle. Now this impulse which rises in the pacemaker is relayed to the ventricles with the help of special conducting fibers. So the pacemaker, also known as sinoatrial node, abbreviated as SAN, is present near the opening of the vena cava, while the AVN node, that is atrioventricular node, is found near the interauricular septum, that is near the tricuspid valve. So there is a bundle of muscle fibers which is known as bundle of HIS, which begins from the AVN, that is atrioventricular node, and it extends to the interventricular septum, that is near the tricuspid valve. So this bundle of muscle fibers, known as bundle of HIS, it is made up of branches of fibers running along the walls of the ventricle. So there are fibers which you'll see on the wall of the ventricle running all over, and this is known as Purkinje fibers. So all this together, it forms a system which creates an impulse, okay, a nerve impulse, and conducts it to each and every part of the heart. So this diagram shows you the location of the pacemaker or the sinoatrial node, or SAN, on the wall of the auricle. You can see, and it goes down, and the AVN or the atrioventricular node is here, just near the intraauricular septum, near the tricuspid valve. So this is the tricuspid valve. So just next to the tricuspid valve, you will see the atrioventricular node or the AVN, and from there it goes right down here, okay, and between the interventricular septum, that is between the two ventricles, then you can see how it goes in all direction as Purkinje fibers carrying the impulse with them. Now, sometimes the pacemaker becomes faulty, it doesn't work properly. So, an artificial pacemaker can be fixed in the heart of such a person. Okay, now next, moving on to the blood vessels. Now, you know, blood vessels are the branch tube which carries blood from the heart to all different parts of the body. There are three kinds: arteries, capillaries, and veins. Now, when we talk about an artery, we are talking about a blood vessel which carries blood away from the heart. Artery starts with an A. So remember, from A you get away. Okay, so it carries blood away from the heart towards any organ. So remember, maximum arteries carries oxygenated blood because it is taking blood from the heart away from the heart. Okay, towards the organs. The only artery which carries deoxygenated blood is pulmonary artery, which is carrying deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs so that it gets oxygenated. Now, the characteristics of an arteries have thick muscular walls. They have a very thin or narrow lumen. Lumen means the central bore through which the blood will flow. Okay, the central bore. And the blood in it flows in spurts, which corresponds to the ventricular contraction. As the ventricles contract, the blood will move in spurts, means quickly, it will move quickly. Like if you hold a garden pipe and you want to water some plants, if you put your thumb, what will happen to the water? It will go up to a longer distance and it will flow in spurts. So that is what spurts mean. Okay, so there you can see, this is the artery, this is the lumen in the center. Okay, and through which the blood flows, and there is an external layer, the connective tissue, which is known as tunica externa. The middle layer here, this is the middle layer, which is the smooth muscle and elastic fibers. It is known as tunica media in the middle. Okay, and then you have a layer of endothelium, which is known as tunica interna. Okay, now moving on to the vein. So if artery carries blood away from the heart towards the organ, so a vein is a blood vessel which carries blood away from the organ towards the heart. Okay, so just the opposite. So characteristic of the vein, it has very thin and muscular walls. It has a wider lumen. So here only you can see the lumen. If you compare it with the artery here, it has a wider lumen, and the blood in it flows uniformly, like nicely, peacefully it flows there, does not flow in spurts. Okay, and it has thin pocket shaped valves whose opening face in the direction of the heart, towards the heart. So you know the valves means it does not allow the backflow of blood. Okay, so here you can see, this is how the blood flows towards the heart. The valve opens. Okay, once the blood flows through the valves, the blood cannot flow back because the valve is closed. The blood presses the valve and so it is closed. Now the smallest or the final branch of an artery is known as arteriole. Arterioles are highly muscular. It has muscular walls and they can change their diameter. Manifold means their diameter can be very small. Okay, and finally the arteriole breaks up into capillaries. Now a capillary is a very narrow tube, about 8 micrometers in diameter. It is that thin. Okay, so when we talk about a capillary, we're talking about blood vessel, the smallest part of the blood vessel. Artery breaks up into arterioles. The arterioles further breaks up into capillaries. So the characteristics of a capillary: the wall consists of a single layer of squamous epithelial cells or endothelium. It does not have any muscles, and the total number of blood capillaries present in our body is almost inconceivable. Inconceivable means we can't even see how many capillaries are there in our body. Now, if all the blood capillaries of the blood were placed end to end, they would extend to a length of 1 100,000 kilometers, that means 1 lakh kilometers, and their total wall surface area would be more than 500 square meters. Okay, so here this diagram shows you how the artery breaks up into arteriole first, and then the arteriole breaks up into arterial capillaries, and then the arterial capillaries, they combine with the venous capillaries, and the venous capillary will form the venule, and the venule will go and join the vein. Okay, so here in between you have the organ. It may be any organ, it may be the liver, it may be the spleen. Okay, so moving on to the functions of capillaries. The functions of capillary, the first function is to allow the outward diffusion of oxygen. First, the oxygen diffuses out from the capillaries into the intercellular fluid between the cells, and from there it moves into the tissue cells. And another function, the next function, is to allow inward diffusion of carbon dioxide from the intercellular fluid. Carbon dioxide moves out from the cells into the intercellular fluid. Next is to allow inward and outward diffusion of substances like glucose, amino acid. It goes into the cells. And urea, hormones comes out from the cells, or hormones may go into the cells wherever it is required. It also allows leukocytes or white blood cells to squeeze out through the capillary walls by means of amoeboid movement. Remember, the process is known as diapedesis. Okay, now the capillaries have the power of dilating, that means becoming larger. It is known as vasodilation, and contracting, becoming thin. Okay, that is known as vasoconstriction, which respectively increases or decreases the blood supply to the body parts. So if a certain body part requires less oxygen or less food, then what will happen? It will contract. And if it requires more, then the capillaries will dilate. So you can see such proof in the capillaries as seen in the color of the skin. If you walk in the hot sun, your face turns pink or red in color because there is increased blood flow. That means in this case, what is happening to the capillaries? It is dilating. More blood is flowing into your face. When it is cold, the face turns bluish. That means there is less blood flow. So in this case, what is happening to the capillaries? It is contracting. Vasoconstriction is taking place. So finally the capillaries reunite and increase in size, assuming the same three layers. Okay, connective tissues, muscular layer, and endothelium, as in arteries and in veins. So the smallest united common branch is known as a venule, and the venules join to form larger veins. Okay, so when you compare arterioles, that is the smaller part of the arteries, and the venules, you will see that the venules are larger but with weak muscular coat. So this difference between arteries and veins, very important, children, please learn. So this is all for today, children. In the next upload, we'll start from where we left off today. The assignment for today is to draw the diagrams of the arteries, veins, and capillaries and write down their characteristics and submit it on Wednesday, that is 29th of July. Till then, children, stay safe. God bless you.